Hello, so today we're actually going to be talking about Cipher a little bit. Please make sure to like and subscribe because we're working on our 10,000 sub goal RP giveaway. So this is actually a presentation or a little PowerPoint that I made a little bit before talking about Cipher. I actually made a guide already on how to play Cipher that's on my channel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about some amendments to this just because there are a couple of better options for cash outs nowadays just because of how much Cipher has been buffed. So I just wanted to do a little bit of an update that might be really relevant, especially on the current patch, given some changes that happened within the last couple of patches and patch notes and stuff like that. But if you like my content, make sure to like and subscribe. And to check out some of the old content, I'll link this old Cipher video because I'm not going to go through everything all over again because obviously that would be really repetitive. But I'm going to kind of skim over some of the early details and we're going to talk about some new cash out options or some new boards you can try and make, which is mostly Cipher reroll. So when we're thinking about Cipher, Cipher is a dedicated loss streak. In case you didn't watch the first video, I'll still link it above. But the idea is you're basically trying to lose as many rounds as possible and then try and cash out some sort of big loot that you would get from one of these cash out tables. And the idea with Cipher is that you're losing in order to gain resources, and then you want to play some sort of high cap comp that you'll then win out with. Before, the high cap comp was usually, like in the previous video, I just recommended whatever the meta most broken comp in the game is usually what you're going to try and play with Cipher. So currently right now, one of the best win out comps, if you're just going for a win out comp, would be Cipher into Amp. Amp became, like, you know, the go-to hallmark of being a really broken strong comp. Another good option for cash out is also Exotech because it's really stable. It does have a high cap if you hit a Garen, but you can often stabilize pretty easily on level 8 with that. But like I said, whatever the current best comp is in the game, that's usually what you're going to try and aim towards when you're playing Cipher. However, there are some other options nowadays, which is actually playing around Cipher itself. When we talk about Cipher cash outs, we're not going to go through the actual cash outs now. I'll go through them at the end of the video just to like reiterate it. But if you're really curious, basically you can go on any stats website that you choose. Here I'm using tactics.tools. You can go under tools tables, and then on the tables, the first one on tactics.tools is actually Cipher. So it'll tell you, hey, this is what the intel is, and these are the cash outs for that much intel, and it'll tell you what the cash outs are. It's a good useful tip I said in the previous video as well, to know some of the key cash outs, to just have like a good idea of what you can get so you're not just instantly surprised and it's just like a really bad situation for you. But generally speaking, some of the best cash outs are going to be in that 290 range. 290, you really can't miss with any of these. So a lot of times people will play around the 290 cash out. Sometimes you can even take Cipher out. If you don't know this already, right? If you're playing around Cipher, you don't have to have Cipher in to get the cash out, right? So for example, when you read Cipher, there's certain rounds that you will trade your intel. If you have the intel, you won't gain any more intel, but you can effectively sell every single Cipher unit, and then on, you know, whatever the next intel round is, 4-3, 4-7, 5-5, whichever round it is, you'll still get the prompt to give you the cash out, yes or no. So you don't actually have to have Cipher in the turn that you accept the cash out. So sometimes people will just, like, you know, get to 290 and then sell their Cipher units, start pivoting their board, start leveling, start doing whatever they want, just because it's like a much more reliable cash out. 330 is a little bit awkward, right? There are some of these cash outs you can make good use of. I think, like, you know, the 330 cash outs, as well as some of the later cash outs that have like emblems and stuff, you can play towards some specific comps. There are situations where people sometimes try and play around Mordecai's or Fiddlesticks, right? You play Fiddlesticks reroll with some of the cash outs, especially if you get some of the lower end cash outs like 250, right? 2-star Alistar, 2-star Mundo, 2-star Mundo, 2-star Alistar, and a frying pan. Usually this is an amazing cash out if you're playing around Fiddlesticks, for example. You just have like Fiddlesticks bruisers and you play 6 bruiser and you get the frying pan. But I wouldn't recommend that comp in general with Cipher anymore, just because after the changes to Redemption to make it Anima Visage, the comp feels significantly lower cap. It's extremely hard to get it to work unless you already have a good spot for it. So be careful, right? That's all I'll say, is be careful with that one. But anyways, let's go back to talking about the Cipher, typical Cipher game, right? You play Cipher, high win out, usually cashing out 3-7 or 4-1. Like I said, I'm skimming through some of these details, but we're going to talk about the playing Cipher, which is this first point, right? You go for a giga cash out and then you play around Cipher, or you don't even need to go for a cash out, and that is Cipher reroll, or lines that usually involve you playing 5 Cipher. What ended up happening recently, the reason I'm making this video, is because of these lines in particular that are really prevalent on this patch, in my opinion. are really powerful this patch and should be more prevalent in your games, or you might even see it a little bit more often. The idea is that when you cash out your loot, whatever your loot is, you also get this extra benefit of all of your Cipher units getting AP and AD. So these numbers got buffed a lot, especially on 4 and 5 intel over the last couple of patches, and with some unit changes and unit buffs as well, we're now at a point where playing around 5 Cipher is actually extremely strong with some of these Cipher units. So sometimes what you can do is, if you're playing around Cipher, and if your Cipher cash out gets griefed, or if you're playing something like Hostile Takeover, right? So there is an augment where you're playing Win Streak Cipher, right? Hostile Takeover, where instead of losing with Cipher, you now try and play for a win out. You can actually play around getting any Cipher cash out that you want and just using it as a tool of getting a huge stat buff on the Cipher units. If you read the Cipher units as well, they also have really good synergy with each other, right? Galio kind of has an effect where he stuns and hits a backline unit. Zed jumps to the backline and hits them. Leblanc scales over the fight and sends out more and more sigils, but she also hits multiple enemies, right? Target and nearest enemy, so she has like an AoE effect. And then Draven launches his axes across the board in a straight line, so he just hits the backline as well. This comp is extremely powerful and extremely good at just like disrupting backline units as well as killing backline units, especially because you're gonna have a bunch of AP and AD. These units are all gonna hit like a goddamn truck. It's gonna be extremely powerful. So this is one of the options that you can play around Cipher, and you can actually just dedicate yourself to Cipher reroll, regardless of if you have a really big cash out. Obviously, if you have a big cash out, the cash outs are going to be insane, but you know, if your Cipher gets griefed, if you have good items for the units, you actually have two main options, right? One of them is playing around Cipher with Draven as your main carry, and one of them could be around Leblanc as your main carry. The Leblanc one is a little bit more particular, a little bit less common, I would say, but this is an example of 5 Cipher playing around Zed. There are lots of different variations. You could play deeper into Bastion. I actually have a video on my channel where I played around Galio Cipher with a small cash out and played around like 4 Bastion variation. It's not a strong variation, but it is one nonetheless. But this is the board that I'm trying to explain to you guys, or trying to show you guys. And basically what you do with this board is a lot of times you're going to re-roll on level 7, right? So you're not going to go to level 8. You're not going to push levels really aggressively. Instead, what you're going to be going for is Galio 3-star, Draven 3-star, and then if you can also go for LeBlanc 3-star. And the idea is that Galio becomes this insanely strong tank, right? With the huge buff to his AP as well from cashing out Cipher, he becomes unkillable because he has armor from Bastion. You're going to build him some really good tank items, and then he's going to have an insane amount of durability. So with the Galio, you're just going for giga tank items, right? Your Warmogs, and because you're not playing deep into Bastion, you can also build like giga resistances, right? Think like your Warmogs, your Bramble, your Declaw, your giga resistances. But any items work really well because this Galio is going to tank forever. He's going to live forever, and he also disrupts backline units, so you often want to put him within 3 hexes, so you're usually trying to pick a side with him if possible to try and disrupt the backline carry so that he hits them. Then you also have Draven. Rapid fire, so a lot of times you're just playing an extra rapid fire unit. Here I have Zeri, but the rapid fire is not that big of an auto attacker. He actually does a lot of damage by just casting. So what ends up happening is usually you'll build him with a Shojin, right? He's going to be one of those rare cases where a Shojin works out really well because he's like a more of a casting unit rather than an auto attacker. And then additionally, you just build him for full damage just to snipe and delete the backline. So a really good combo: Infinity Edge and Guardbreaker. Right? Infinity Edge Guardbreaker, and you just snipe the backline and call it a day. Just full crit, right? You make your ult crit with Infinity Edge, boost your AD. You're already getting a lot of AD from 5 Cipher, so that works out really nicely. And then you have Guardbreaker, which then gives you some extra damage amp, but also scales up your crit chance to make sure that your ult is always critting. So that works out amazingly. So you just do an item combo like that. If you're playing LeBlanc, a lot of times with LeBlanc, you're usually going for like blue buff to try and like get her to chain cast. LeBlanc works really well with certain Ornn artifacts as well, like Manazane, right? One that just gives her a lot of early casts because she also scales over time, right? She sends sigils and then it increases every time she does a cast. So if you can get her to cast a lot of times at the beginning of a fight, it will scale her within that fight to be very strong. So usually, then after these items, usually you can just like figure out and play whatever you can. A lot of times with Leblanc, like your other items could either be more scaling, like an Archangel's, or you can just go for full damage. So that's something like, you know, your Jewel Gauntlet and your Guard Breaker. You can also go for more of like a chain cast and give her a Shojin as well, but I think it's a little bit overkill. I'd rather just have damage to scale up her base stats. And then we have Zed, right? When you're playing this comp, a lot of times itemizing Zed is going to be really powerful. Most times you don't end up hitting LeBlanc in addition to like the Draven and the Galio. So usually you're going to itemize your Draven and then also build Zed items. Zed is really flexible because you have so much stats from Cipher. So you can build him for full damage, right? You're not going to be playing deep into Slayer with these lines. So you want to be a little bit careful. You could cash this out and play Slayer anyways if you don't want to reroll Draven Galio. But what I would recommend if you're not playing Slayer, you really want to have some good Omnivamp on him. So Bloodthirster works out nicely. You can actually go for like a drain tank kind of build and go for like double healing just so that he lives forever, something like this. But typically you could just go for like a lot of damage, something like IE and then Asterix, which gives you like a little bit of a second lease at life could work well. But you have a lot of different options here because the Zed just like runs around and is a nuisance. So you can either make him more of a nuisance by giving him survivability, or you can make him like, you know, be one and done and kill the backline unit by giving him full damage. You can even go like a Guard Breaker, for example. And then if you want to go like full crit, like you want to giga crit and always be critting everything that you do every step of the way, you can also go like Hodge, IE, Guard Breaker. That's what I mean. There's so many different types of builds. A lot of it comes down to like if your opponent has really good burst. So for example, if the Zed is going into like a Xayah, then he just, you know, teleports into the Xayah and just gets one tapped, then you might want to have more survivability there. You know, like the Sterix comes in clutch in those spots, but it's just a mess, right? But anyways, that's like the main idea that I want to present is this reroll line. And the reason this reroll line also works really well is because a lot of the early Cipher cashouts can actually give you good resources to hit your units. For example, like a 250 charge Cipher cashout gives you 4 lesser champ duplicators. That is extremely powerful in just hitting your Draven 3, Galio 3 out of nowhere, right? 4 duplicators, that is a massive hit. Additionally, there's some of the later cashouts that actually give you copies of either items that work with those units or actual copies of the units. For example, if you're playing like Hostile Takeover, you can often get to these really high Cipher cashouts where then you just get like Giga Draven items, right? Like these 3 items on a Draven 3 and you just win the game for free. Could be really strong. Even some of the later cashouts that you're kind of forced to play around Vi and LeBlanc, these can actually help you to be extremely powerful with these type of boards, which kind of gets rid of a little bit of the RNG with some of the later cashouts where it might feel like you don't have a good game plan to play around the units, but stuff like this can actually really help you in those cases. Additionally, if we're just trying to build up the synergies, obviously you just want to play a Bastion for the Galio, just to make him have survivability. You want to play a Rapid Fire. Something that works really well is just to play the Renekton, and then Renekton can get like, you know, a bunch of extra stats from somebody and be a little bit of a menace as well. And then to activate one Slayer, you can actually just play a Jarvan. Jarvan gives you Vanguard and Slayer if you're playing around 5 Cipher. Sometimes if you hit a lot of legendary units, you could drop from 5 Cipher down to 4 Cipher, because especially if you don't have a Vi 3, you might be able to do something like this and then play like extra legendary units, stuff like Garen or Kabuko even, or even a Zac, and then play around 4 Cipher and cap your board a little bit differently. This is something that can also work for any particular board. But, you know, typically speaking, if you're going for more of an easy route, you can just keep in the 5 Cipher and just play around the Giga stats that you get from this. Additionally, there is this Leblanc reroll variation. So when we're talking about Leblanc reroll, Leblanc's gonna be your main carry. What you actually do is you can still play 5 Cipher, but instead of playing more into the Draven synergies, you just try and activate some Leblanc synergies. Here you can get a Bastion and a Vanguard and activate Anima by going for Yuumi, and you could also go for a Yuumi 3-star, which actually does a lot of damage, and then cap out your board maybe with Amp or more Strategists. This works particularly well if you have a Strategist emblem, or if you get one of the cashouts that gives you Strategist emblems or stuff like that, because then you can make great use of this this type of board. But typically you're rerolling here. This one, like I said, is a lot less common. I would say that you should only go for this if you hit a Mana Zane, right? Like Mana Zane is really good on LeBlanc because basically Mana Zane just allows you to chain cast your first couple of casts. So if you have something like, you know, Mana Zane, blue buff, and this LeBlanc is just giga scaling and just doing an insane, absurd amount of damage very early on in the game, very early on in a fight, then I would say maybe go for the Leblanc variation here out of Cipher, because you're just going to get a bunch of base stats and you can just usually win streak and be extremely potent by rolling on level 6 or level 7. But your high cap with this is going to be the same as with the other Cipher, and that's going to be going for your Galio 3 and your Draven 3 to use a bunch of stats. So you end up usually just going towards this variation anyways. So that's why I'm saying usually just aim for this one. It's a little bit higher cap and a little bit stronger, and you're going to be rolling at a higher level so that you can hit those Zeds and hit those, like, you know, random 5 costs on level 7, as opposed to re-rolling LeBlanc, where it's a little bit awkward, right? You really want to roll on level 7 to find the Zed, but then you also want to roll on level 6 to hit the LeBlanc early. So that's what I mean. Unless you have like perfect LeBlanc items like a Mana Zane and you have like an early Cipher start and you're like, yep, this is a good idea here, I wouldn't necessarily play around that. Like I said, these are two options that you can play around with Cipher. Of course, like usually the go-to option is to play Cipher into high cap comp, which is usually going to be your strat amp comp. I think I made a video on this at one point, so you can check that out as well. Additionally, this is just a general note, so you'll see me trying to do this a little bit more. Obviously Cipher, I'm doing this with the intention of being an amendment to a previous video that I did. If you how do I phrase it? If you have a question about a video that I may or may not have done, there's actually a really good feature on YouTube, which is this search bar right here. I've done so many guides over the past 2 sets that I've pretty much covered almost, in my opinion, almost every beginner topic in TFT that could exist. So for example, if I look at my recent comments, you know, somebody was asking me, hey, can you make an econ guide talking about intervals? Something you can do is you can just search up econ, right? I'm not calling out anybody. I'm just saying this is something you can try out. And then I have the set 13 econ guide, and then the amended version for set 14 that talks about the exact thing that you basically asked for. There are also playlists, but they're a little bit awkward because nobody really watches them anyway, so I don't update them too much. But like a lot of the how to play guides are in playlist form, and then I have all my music playlists as well. Sorry, so that's the old how to play Cipher video. But anyways, this was the amendment I wanted to do. Today was just going to be a short video because I'm a little bit busy. I'm actually going to be fixing up my PC a little bit. It's getting hot in the summer. Temps are rising a little bit. I actually bought fans back in early May to put into my PC because right now it's running on, like, you know, very few stock fans. So I'm going to be updating my PC right after this video, so hopefully a little bit of an early update, a little bit of an early upload for you guys. And just want to talk about these extra variations that you can do. Try them out. I guarantee you they'll be really strong, but obviously don't just force them from not having a good opener. And like I said, these rerolls work particularly well with some of the Cipher augments like hostile takeover, for example, that can just do absolute wonders. And then of course, if you want to get the full Cipher guide, talk about like many of the aspects of the game as well as conditions and all of that type of stuff, please check out the original Cipher guide. It's still going to be relevant, just the comps that you cap out around might be a little bit different, obviously, because it's patch dependent. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and see ya. Bye bye.